Welcome to Rising Parent, your go-to podcast for navigating the ups and downs of family life. I'm your host, Edna, and I'm here to help you create a harmonious home environment. In this episode, we're tackling the age-old battle of sibling rivalry. From squabbles over toys to full-blown feuds, we've all been there. But don't worry, we've got expert advice to help you foster peace and understanding between your little ones. So grab your favorite beverage and get ready for some sibling-related drama and a whole lot of parenting tips. Let's dive in.
Okay, you know that feeling when you're about to just dive into a pool and you just know it's going to be like refreshingly cold?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what this deep dive feels like. We're about to plunge into the world of sibling relationships.
Yeah.
A topic that's so universal, yet we rarely stop to think about how deeply it shapes us. Get this. The Sprouts video we've got stacked up here says that kids today are actually more likely to grow up with a sibling than with a father.
Wow. Yeah.
That stat totally blew my mind.
It really highlights how central these relationships are in our lives, even if they sometimes feel like just part of the furniture.
Totally. So alongside that Sprouts video, which digs into all the psychology, you've also handed us this awesome article from the Big Life Journal on sibling rivalry.
And I think what's really cool is how these two sources kind of work together.
Okay.
The Sprouts video gives us the big picture, the long-term impact of these relationships.
Right.
While the Big Life Journal gets down to the nitty-gritty of handling those everyday sibling dynamics.
Yes.
Especially for all the parents out there.
Music to my ears. So our mission today, if you choose to accept it, is to not just skim the surface of sibling rivalry, but to unearth those hidden truths about how these relationships mold us.
Yes.
Not just in those childhood years, but across our entire lives.
It's about recognizing those arguments over toys or who gets to sit in the front seat aren't just kid stuff. They're actually crucial learning experiences.
Right. And the Big Life Journal really drives that point home. It's remember those times you desperately tried to break up a fight? Yeah.
And you're just thinking, can't they just get along for 5 minutes?
Right.
Well, it turns out those squabbles are teaching them conflict resolution, boundary setting, and a whole lot more.
It all comes back to this fascinating idea from the Sprouts video, Adler's concept of striving for superiority.
Okay.
Now, before you picture kids in capes trying to take over the world.
Okay, good, because I was starting to worry about my niece and nephew for a second.
It's not about being better than everyone else in a cutthroat way. It's more about this innate drive we all have to find our place, our value in the family system. Sibling rivalry, in a way, is just a natural part of that process as kids try to figure out, who am I in this family unit? What makes me unique and special?
So when my nephew screams at the top of his lungs because his sister looked at him funny,
he's actually on this deep existential quest to define himself.
In a way, yes. It seems silly.
Oh, wow.
But these early power struggles, they're really about establishing identity and autonomy.
Okay, that's a seriously helpful reframe. But speaking of helpful, the Big Life Journal goes a step further and gives parents these 7 fantastic strategies for navigating the choppy waters of sibling rivalry.
And what's great is they're not just vague platitudes like, be nice.
Right.
They're concrete, actionable tips.
Right, and some of them were surprisingly counterintuitive, obviously setting clear family rules is important.
Right.
But the article really emphasized the need for parents to model healthy conflict resolution.
Yes.
We can't exactly tell our kids to use their words if we're constantly throwing passive-aggressive jabs at our own siblings. Right.
Absolutely. It's that whole do as I say, not as I do thing, which, as we all know, just doesn't fly with kids. They're like little hypocrisy detectors, always watching and absorbing how we handle conflict, not just what we say about it.
So true. And here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The Big Life Journal actually suggests that sometimes the best thing we can do as parents is, wait for it, nothing.
Well, not exactly nothing, but stepping back, resisting that urge to immediately intervene in every squabble can be incredibly powerful.
Right. Because if we're always playing referee, kids never learn to work things out for themselves.
Exactly. And the article gave this great example. Imagine 2 siblings arguing over a toy.
Okay.
Instead of immediately confiscating the toy or dictating who gets to play with it for how long,
Yeah.
a parent could coach them through a conversation.
Like, hey, it seems like you both really want to play with this. How can we figure this out so everyone feels good?
Exactly. It's about giving them the tools, and more importantly, the space to practice those essential conflict resolution skills, which, let's be honest, are things most adults still struggle with.
It's like we're giving them a superpower that'll come in handy well beyond the sandbox.
Absolutely.
Another strategy that I thought was pure gold was teaching assertiveness, which, let's be real, is not about raising little lawyers who file cease and desist orders on their siblings for breathing too loudly.
Right.
It's about giving kids the language to communicate their needs and set boundaries in a healthy way.
I love that you brought that up because I think it speaks to this larger theme of empowerment. When we equip children with the ability to advocate for themselves within the sibling relationship, we're not just preventing squabbles. We're building their self-esteem and giving them the tools to navigate all sorts of relationships throughout their lives.
Okay, so we've tackled the why behind sibling rivalry and even dipped our toes into the how of managing those everyday dynamics.
Right.
But there's another layer to this whole sibling saga we need to unpack: birth order.
Yes.
Is it really true that where we fall in the family lineup influences our personalities?
It's a question that has fascinated researchers for ages, and while it's not as simple as saying, oh, you're the oldest, so you must be bossy, there is compelling evidence to suggest that birth order does play a role in shaping who we become.
Okay, spill the tea. I'm dying to know more.
Well, remember, Adler, the psychologist behind the striving for superiority concept, he also had some fascinating theories about birth order. He proposed that firstborns, because they initially have their parents' undivided attention, often grow up modeling themselves after those parental figures.
So that's why I'm such a goody two-shoes.
And while we have to be careful about making sweeping generalizations, not every firstborn is a mini-me of their parents.
Sure.
There's a reason these stereotypes exist. Statistically, firstborns tend to score higher on IQ tests.
Oh, wow.
Potentially because of that early period of intense one-on-one interaction with their caregivers.
Fascinating. But what about us poor, neglected middle children? Just kidding, kind of. What does Adler have to say about us?
Well, the Sprouts video points out that younger siblings often model themselves not so much on their parents,
Right.
but on their older siblings,
Interesting.
which makes sense when you think about it. Older siblings seem way cooler than parents when you're little. They're like these legendary figures who know all the cool games, have all the good snacks, and get to stay up late.
Totally. They're like mini gods. So how does that play out in terms of personality?
Well, because younger siblings have to find their own niche, their own way to stand out, they often develop different skills and interests than their older siblings. They might be more adaptable, more social, or more creative. They might also be more rebellious, pushing against the established order.
It's like they're trying to carve out their own space in the family ecosystem, right?
Exactly. And that leads us perfectly into the concept of differentiation, which is a fancy way of saying.
Hold on, differentiation, like calculus. Please tell me there won't be a pop quiz at the end of this podcast episode.
No pop quiz, I promise, and no calculus. In this context, differentiation just means that siblings naturally gravitate towards different interests, skills, and even personality traits as a way to minimize competition and create their own unique identities within the family.
Ah, okay, that makes way more sense. So if my older sister is the star athlete, maybe I become the bookworm and my little brother becomes the class clown.
Exactly. It's a way of reducing conflict and ensuring that each sibling feels seen and valued for who they are, not just in comparison to their siblings.
Wow, this is also fascinating. It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, and with each layer, we're getting a clearer picture of the complex dynamics at play in sibling relationships.
And these dynamics, these patterns we establish early on, they can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond our childhood years, shaping our relationships and our sense of self well into adulthood.
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. Get ready for some truly mind-blowing insights into the long-term impact of sibling relationships.
Okay, so we've been on this incredible journey through the world of sibling relationships, uncovering all these hidden dynamics and aha moments about rivalry, birth order, and finding our unique place within the family system.
Right.
But I'm really curious, what happens when we pack up those childhood bedrooms and head out into the wider world? Do those sibling dynamics, those patterns we established way back when, continue to shape us even as adults?
It's a fascinating question, right? Because we often think of sibling relationships as something we grow out of,
Yeah.
like those embarrassing childhood photos we keep hidden in the attic.
Right.
But the reality is, these bonds, these dynamics we navigate early on,
Yeah.
they have this incredible staying power.
Okay, so it's not just me who still feels that twinge of annoyance when my older brother tells me what to do, even though we're both pushing 40.
You're definitely not alone.
Yeah.
And it's not just about those little quirks or annoyances that resurface.
Right.
The Sprouts video actually presented some pretty mind-blowing research,
Okay.
suggesting that these relationships have a tangible impact on our well-being, even decades down the line.
Okay.
Remember that Swedish study we talked about earlier?
The one about people in their 80s.
That's the one. They found that feeling close to a sibling, like really close,
Right.
was significantly correlated with overall life satisfaction.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. It actually had a stronger association with life satisfaction than close friendships.
Whoa, seriously. So even after a lifetime of experiences, marriage, kids, careers, that sibling bond still packs a powerful punch.
It seems so. And really makes you think about the unique nature of these relationships, right?
Yeah.
They're often our longest-lasting relationships, the ones that span the entirety of our lives, for better or worse.
It's like this invisible thread that connects us across time and distance, even when life gets messy. I have to admit, that study gives me all the warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second. Not every sibling relationship is a Hallmark movie waiting to happen.
Right.
What about those of us who didn't exactly grow up with the Brady Bunch?
That's such an important point. And the video doesn't shy away from that reality.
Right.
Just as positive sibling relationships can have these incredible long-term benefits,
Yeah.
strained or difficult relationships can unfortunately have lasting negative effects as well.
So those childhood rivalries, those resentments, those can follow us into adulthood if they're not addressed.
Unfortunately, that can be the case.
Wow.
Unresolved conflicts, patterns of criticism or competition,
Right.
they can continue to resurface in our adult interactions, impacting our self-esteem, our relationships, even our mental health.
So how do we break free from those negative patterns? Are we destined to repeat the same dysfunctional dance with our siblings that we learned as kids, just with fewer temper tantrums and slammed doors?
Not necessarily. And this is where things get really empowering.
Okay.
The key is awareness. By understanding the dynamics at play, the impact of birth order, the importance of differentiation, the long-term effects of both positive and negative interactions, we can start to make conscious choices about how we interact with our siblings in the present.
So it's not about blaming our parents or our siblings for past hurts or carrying around this baggage of resentment.
Right.
It's about taking ownership of our own role in the dynamic and choosing to show up differently now.
Exactly. It might require setting boundaries,
Hmm.
having those difficult conversations we've been avoiding,
Yeah.
or even seeking professional help if old wounds run deep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never too late to try to build healthier, more fulfilling relationships with our siblings.
That's really encouraging to hear. Because I think deep down, most of us want to have those strong, supportive relationships with our siblings. They're our built-in best friends, our partners in crime, our biggest cheerleaders, even if they don't always act like it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make that happen? What are some practical steps we can take to start shifting those dynamics, especially if we've got a lot of history to unpack?
Well, that's a question we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've journeyed deep into this fascinating world of sibling relationships.
Yeah.
We've been unearthing all these hidden dynamics that shape us from childhood squabbles to those lifelong bonds.
Right.
But now for the million-dollar question,
Mm-hmm.
how do we actually put all this incredible insight into practice?
That's where things get really exciting because it's not about some one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
It's about taking these golden nuggets of knowledge and applying them to your own unique sibling saga.
I love that. Okay, so let's start with the parents who are listening in.
Okay.
We've got those 7 fantastic strategies from the Big Life Journal article.
Right.
But if you could only choose one to focus on,
Yeah.
based on all this research, what would it be?
If I had to pick just one, it would be fostering empathy.
Okay.
And I don't just mean teaching kids to say, I'm sorry or share.
Right.
Although those are great starting points.
Sure.
It's about helping them to really step into their siblings' shoes.
Yeah.
To understand that there are always multiple perspectives in any situation,
Right.
especially in argument.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know what? I think it goes hand in hand with that idea of differentiation we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
If we can encourage kids to appreciate their siblings' unique qualities,
Yeah.
strengths, challenges, even those quirky differences.
Right.
It shifts the dynamic away from competition and toward understanding.
Exactly. It's about moving away from that scarcity mindset that there's only so much love or attention to go around.
Right.
And embracing the abundance that comes from recognizing and valuing each child's individuality.
Okay, that's powerful stuff. But what about those of us who are way past the point of fighting over Legos? How do we navigate these dynamics as adults, especially if we've got some baggage from our childhood?
It starts with that same principle, empathy.
Okay.
But it also requires a healthy dose of self-awareness.
Okay.
What patterns did we learn growing up? What
Yeah.
roles did we play?
Right.
Once we understand those dynamics, we can start making conscious choices about how we interact with our siblings today.
So it's not about holding on to blame or resentment. It's about recognizing those old patterns and making the conscious choice to show up differently now.
You got it. It might mean setting boundaries, having those tough conversations,
Right.
or even seeking professional help if those old wounds run deep.
Yeah.
But remember, it's never too late to try to build healthier, more fulfilling relationships with our siblings.
That's really inspiring. And, it makes me think about how incredibly valuable these relationships are despite their complexities.
Yes.
I mean, who else has known us longer, seen us at our absolute best and worst than our siblings?
They are our shared history, walking, talking reminders of where we came from.
Wow.
And while that shared history might include its fair share of squabbles and rivalries,
Right.
it also holds the potential for deep connection, understanding, and, yes, even love.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of sibling relationships, I think the question I'm left with is this. Knowing what we now know about these complex dynamics, how can we approach them with more intention, more empathy, and maybe even a little more grace, both in childhood and adulthood? It's something to chew on, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I have a feeling this is a conversation that will continue long after we stop recording.
It always does. And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wonderful world of siblings. Until next time, remember, a little empathy goes a long way in those lifelong bonds.